You can be friends for many years, know each other since childhood, and still never really know a person well enough. Sometimes, people only skillfully pretend to be friends, playing on others' feelings and responding to sincerity and trust with lies and underhanded betrayal. Of course, a life without disappointments is impossible, but we still least expect betrayal from our friends and sometimes rely on them blindly. The story of a young British student shocked the entire country with its cruelty and cynicism. But the most important thing is that, despite the lack of an alibi and his strange behavior, the perpetrator was not initially suspected. The reason for this was that they had known each other since childhood, were neighbors, and had been friends for many years. When the truth came to light, neither the parents of the murdered woman nor the numerous mutual friends of the deceased and the murderer could believe it. Only the surviving victims of the seemingly harmless young man believed it. Keeley Bunker was born on September 19, 1999, in the British town of Tamworth, Staffordshire, in Western England. She was the eldest of 3 children and the only daughter in the humble Bunker family. From an early age, Keeley was a true supporter of her mother, helping her raise and care for her younger brothers. The girl was always very close to her family, and her parents described her as the best daughter anyone could wish for. Those around her valued her as friendly, helpful, and very kind, as she never hesitated to help anyone. After graduating from high school, the talented and determined Keeley was able to study at a teacher training college at a prestigious public research university. Her happiness knew no bounds, and her parents were very proud of their daughter. The girl quickly integrated into her new community and made friends. She easily connected with other people, and her studies came quite easily to her. At the same time, Keeley continued to dance and maintain an active social life, attending concerts, sporting events, various parties, and other events with fellow students. She had profiles on popular social media, where she regularly posted photos of herself and reported on her studies, hobbies, and important events in her life. In the summer of 2019, at the age of 19, Keeley began looking for her first job and soon found luck. She was invited to an interview for a position as a teaching assistant at an elementary school. Coincidentally, it was the very school she had recently graduated from. She was overjoyed to be returning and was scheduled to start work at the end of September. Keeley took a part-time position at the elementary school to balance her work with university studies. She carefully prepared for this new phase of her life, convinced it would be an excellent start to her career in education. At the same time, she wanted to celebrate her 20th birthday, her first birthday as an adult. She planned to spend the Saturday evening of September 7, 2019, at home with her family. The quiet and cozy celebration was attended only by her parents, her younger brothers, her grandparents, and her maternal uncle with his wife and children. These were the people who stood close to Keeley and whom she loved the most. She decided to celebrate her birthday with her friends a few days later. The following Saturday, September 14, the student organized a party and gathered friends and fellow students in one of the city's entertainment venues. They celebrated and danced until the morning, and Keeley looked very happy and content. Among the invited guests were Keeley's best friend, Monique Riggin, as well as her neighbor and childhood friend, Wesley Street, with whom Keeley had gone to the same school and had been friends since the first grade. Nothing indicated any misfortune, and no one could have guessed that the student had less than a week to live. Monique gave her friend tickets for her birthday to a concert of her favorite rapper, which was to take place on Wednesday, September 18th, in the neighboring city of Birmingham. They drove to the concert together and planned everything in advance. The students had several options for getting to and from the concert in the other town. Firstly, Both had driver's licenses and their own cars, but since the friends planned to relax and have a drink that evening, they abandoned this idea. Secondly, someone from Keeley or Monique's family could have picked them up, but they didn't want to disturb anyone, as the artist's performance ended around 1 p.m., and everyone had to go to work the next day. The third option, traveling by train themselves, seemed the best. However, there was a small catch. The train ran according to a schedule, and at night there was only one connection to Tamworth. But the friends were not worried about it, and were confident they would manage, as they still had plenty of time after the concert. On the agreed day, the students met and went to their favorite artist's concert together. They had a great time, enjoying the music, dancing, and singing along. After the event, still in high spirits, and with time to kill before the last train left, they decided to go to a bar to sit and chat for a while. There they met Wesley, who had originally come with another group. When the young man saw Keeley and Monique, he joined them at the table. They continued chatting and drinking cocktails. The young people were so excited that they didn't even notice how quickly the time passed. When they realized the time, they had missed the night train to their city. They didn't want to wake their parents to pick them up, so they decided to take a taxi home. Besides, the three of them shared the fare, so it wasn't expensive for the students. A surveillance camera at the entrance to the entertainment venue recorded two young women and a young man leaving the bar at around 9:30 a.m. and getting into a taxi. The ride home took about half an hour, and everyone got out at the intersection next to Monique's house. Keeley had left her cosmetic bag and perfume with her the day before when they went to the concert and wanted to get her things. Monique offered her friends to stay the night at her house, but Bunker had plans for the next day. She wanted to change clothes and get some things from her room. Keeley's house was no more than a 15-minute walk away. Besides, her boyfriend lived in the same town, but on a parallel street. She even joked, saying to her friend, "I have Wesley. I have nothing to fear with him. He can defend both of us." Monique could do nothing but agree. The friends said their goodbyes at the front door, after which Monique returned to the house. About half an hour later, Monique texted her friend to ask if she'd arrived safely and if everything was okay, but she didn't reply. The student didn't attach any importance to it and didn't panic, assuming her friend had simply fallen asleep, as they were all exhausted after such an eventful day. Monique also went to sleep and made no further attempts to call or text Keeley. Keeley's parents didn't immediately raise the alarm either, as they knew how mature, responsible, and independent their daughter was. They trusted her completely and couldn't imagine that anything bad could have happened. Throughout the evening and most of the night, Keeley posted photos from the concert and the bar on her social media page, so her father and mother could see where and with whom she was spending time. Since they knew Monique and Wesley well, they were not worried. When it turned out in the morning that the young woman had not spent the night at home, the parents assumed that Keeley had stayed with her best friend, which had happened several times before. Monique woke up the next day around noon and saw that her friend hadn't responded to her message. This struck her as odd, but she reassured herself that perhaps Keeley had wanted to sleep in, or that she was in such a hurry that she didn't have time to call or write. In any case, Monique believed that the missing girl's parents would have already raised the alarm if something had happened. However, when Keeley still hadn't responded by around 3 p.m., and her phone was switched off, her friend began to suspect something was wrong. She called Keeley's family herself and asked if their daughter was all right. Needless to say, after this call, real panic broke out, because it turned out that Keeley hadn't spent the night at home or with Monique. The friend explained that Keeley had refused to stay the night with her because she had plans the next day and had gone home with Wesley, who had agreed to accompany her since they were headed in the same direction anyway. After that, the student stopped calling, and her phone was switched off. It was urgent to speak to the young man and find out what had happened and where Keeley had gone. The terrified parents went to Wesley's house to find out everything. The door was opened by the sleepy young man, who was very surprised to be told that Keeley hadn't come home the previous night. He admitted that he hadn't accompanied his friend to the front door, but only to the phone booth on the corner, where their paths diverged. It was no more than 50 meters to Keeley's house, and she said she could manage the rest on her own. Wesley Street said he didn't insist, as he was very tired and wanted to go to bed quickly. After saying goodbye to Keeley, he turned onto his street and didn't even look back to check if she had arrived. Moreover, when he got home, he didn't call her to ask if everything was okay, but simply turned off his cell phone and went to sleep without a care in the world. Now he felt guilty and scolded himself for not having accompanied his friend to the door. Upon hearing Wesley's account, the bunker couple immediately reported Keeley's disappearance to the police. Surprisingly, law enforcement responded quickly to the situation and didn't wait the required 24 hours. The key witnesses in the case were Monique and Wesley, as they were the last people to see and have contact with the missing woman. These two weren't suspected from the start, as they had grown up with Keeley and had been friends since childhood. Nevertheless, they had to be questioned thoroughly, as their statements could be crucial to the investigation. The young people were willing to cooperate with the police and seemed eager to help. They described the sequence of events in detail, down to the minute. After all three had gotten out of the taxi, and their statements agreed on almost every point. As the friends said their goodbyes in front of Monique's house, Wesley and Keeley continued on alone, and according to Wesley, he didn't notice anything suspicious or disturbing on the street. He claimed that he didn't accompany his girlfriend to her front door because he was sick from the alcohol and didn't want to vomit in front of her. He said that he and Keeley walked together to an old telephone booth on the corner. Then Keeley continued straight ahead while he hurried to turn the corner because he felt nauseous. Afterward, he didn't return to the intersection to at least keep an eye on his friend and make sure she had arrived home safely. Unfortunately, on the section where Keeley walked, surveillance cameras were inoperative, making it impossible to verify her safe arrival. Since the events had occurred in the middle of the night, no casual witnesses could be found, and none of the neighbors had seen or heard anything suspicious. The police decided to search the Bunker family's house, assuming Keeley had arrived there but then left. However, this assumption proved to be false, and there was no evidence in the house or in Keeley's room that the missing woman had been there the previous night. The investigators also found nothing suspicious or unusual. Afterward, Monique and Wesley decided to talk to them again. They recounted, step by step, everything that had happened to them during the night. No new details came to light, so the police decided to determine Keeley's location using her cell phone. However, the device was switched off, and the last signal received that night was at the location where she had disappeared. At the request of law enforcement, the mobile phone provider provided data on calls and messages from the missing student's phone, but no clues were found there either. Monique then gave the police the passwords for her best friend's social media pages so they could check her messages. Investigators suspected that Keeley had arranged to meet someone, but this theory could not be confirmed. Keeley was last online around 2:00 a.m. when she posted a few photos from the bar where she was sitting with Monique and Wesley. When Monique and Wesley were summoned again to testify, Monique appeared immediately. She seemed very upset, crying, blaming herself for what had happened to her friend, and was willing to reveal any information. The young man, on the other hand, seemed more irritable with each subsequent questioning, and began to perceive the repeated conversations with the police as a form of suspicion. Furthermore, Wesley became entangled in his statements, changing them and adding or omitting some seemingly insignificant details. For example, he said he felt nauseous almost immediately after parting ways with Keeley, but couldn't remember exactly where it happened, ultimately claiming he was mistaken and that nothing of the sort had happened. He explained these inaccuracies by saying that his memories were distorted due to the heavy consumption of strong alcohol that evening. These inaccuracies were alarming, but the police didn't jump to conclusions. However, when Wesley was asked again to repeat the entire sequence of events, he became frantic and directly asked what he was accused of. His behavior raised more and more questions. Nevertheless, there was still no evidence against the young man. Keeley's parents were informed of the young man's suspicious behavior, but they found nothing unusual in it, noting that Wesley had been friends with their daughter since elementary school and was surely just very worried about her. Monique also suspected that her friend was overexcited and tormented by guilt over her disappearance. From the police station, the investigators, along with Monique and Wesley, returned to the spot where the friends had parted to check whether they had perhaps overlooked any important details. Monique tried to remember every detail as best she could, while the young man stopped answering direct questions and began to justify himself as if he were being accused. Since they found no significant clue, the police organized a large-scale search for the missing student that same day. Search teams were formed, including law enforcement officers and volunteers, as well as members of the Bunker family, their friends, including Monique and Wesley, neighbors, and compassionate people. The entire area was divided into squares for clarity. Abandoned or unfinished buildings and a spacious park with strips of woods and a lake were carefully searched. At around 9 p.m., a terrible discovery was made right on the shore of the body of water. A group led by Keeley's uncle, Jason Bunker, came across a strange pile of branches and leaves. They had barely begun their investigation when they discovered the body of a woman lying motionless, face down. It was the missing student. The unfortunate woman's body was half submerged in water, covered by branches and scattered with leaves and grass. Her clothing was in disarray, clearly indicating sexual violence. Keeley's parents confirmed that these were their daughter's remains. After a thorough examination by forensic experts, the body was handed over to the medical examiner. As suspected, Keeley had been abused, and the attacker's DNA was found on her. The cause of death was asphyxiation. The unfortunate woman was killed with her bare hands. Furthermore, traces of numerous blows were found on her body. Abrasions, bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands indicate that she desperately defended herself and fought for her life. A toxicology test revealed a low level of alcohol in the deceased's blood, suggesting that Keeley wasn't drunk and was aware of what was happening to her. The case was converted to homicide, and Wesley immediately became the prime suspect as he was the last person to see Keeley alive. He was arrested, but since there was still no conclusive evidence against him, he couldn't be detained for long initially. Interestingly, Wesley now behaved completely calmly, detached, and even indifferently. A check revealed that the suspect's cell phone had been turned off at almost the same time and in the same place as the victim's. The young man had fresh bruises and scratches on his hands, the origin of which he couldn't clearly explain. He remained silent and demanded a lawyer. There were several surveillance cameras in the park, and their recordings were carefully examined by experts. One of them showed a couple resembling Wesley and Keeley walking along the avenue. About a quarter of an hour later, A dark male figure with a hood on his head ran off toward the park exit. Although his face was not recognizable, no one doubted it was Wesley. When the arrested man was shown these images, he gave a surprising version of the events of that night. According to him, Keeley suggested they go to the park to walk and talk. They had fun, fooling around, and Wesley playfully put his friend on his shoulders, but only got a few meters. Due to his alcohol consumption, he allegedly slipped, lost his balance, and fell. The woman sitting on his shoulders hit her head hard on the curb and showed no signs of life. Wesley claimed he was very frightened when he realized Keeley wasn't breathing. In his panic, he left her in the park and fled. However, the investigation revealed no signs of a traumatic brain injury on Keeley's body consistent with a fall. The suspect then suggested that someone else had found Bunker and attacked her, after which he tried to dispose of the body by drowning her in the park's lake. The results of the forensic lab soon came in, showing that traces of Wesley's DNA were found on the victim's body. The suspect then told a new, even more unbelievable version of the events. He now claimed that Keeley had lured him to the park herself, and that they had consensual intimacy. He emphasized that everything was voluntary, and that they then said their goodbyes. In his opinion, Keeley had been attacked by someone else on the way home. However, the autopsy revealed injuries consistent with forced assault. With his back against the wall, Wesley again changed his statement, claiming that it was an accident during intimacy where he choked her too hard. No one believed the version that Keeley might have flirted with Wesley. Keeley considered him not only a best friend but a brother, and had never imagined that anything could happen between them. This was unanimously confirmed by all of the murdered students' friends and relatives. The motive was classified as a crime of passion and opportunity. However, as the investigation progressed, even more horrific details from Wesley's biography came to light. As it turned out, this was by no means his first assault on women, but it was the first time he had committed murder. Two other victims of Wesley's, whom he had previously abused, testified in court. Previously, the victims had remained silent for fear, but when they saw on the news that Wesley had been arrested, they decided to report his atrocities. The criminal's trial began in September 2020. Wesley Street was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the right to early release after at least 30 years. He has never admitted his guilt and hasn't apologized to the relatives of the woman he killed. To this day, the perpetrator maintains that Keeley's death was merely a tragic accident. Thanks for watching, and take care.